This is Drop Tent Media Network.
All right, and we're back.
We're back.
All right, this is great. Alison Zeidman's still with us, and
Still
forever.
Nobody saw it coming. Yeah.
Did you think she might leave?
I did think she might leave. I'm super stoked.
I mean, well, it's also just like we're talking about, like, you never know what's going to come. Like,
True.
when you're going to die. So I could have died.
That's true. You could have died.
15-minute break.
So true.
All three of us could have.
And could still leave at any moment. Also, to be fair.
We do have a podcast rule as no one else is allowed to die before Kirsten.
Oh.
She would get really jealous and mad.
That'd be kind of shitty of me to like upstage you.
They would consume me.
But-
Yeah. I never forget
would be good for views.
What if I died like right here on the pod?
Honestly,
Like-
we would do we have your permission here on camera to post
to clip
the
it.
audio if you pass? We won't do
30-second
video.
clip. We won't even make it monetizable unless we
I'll monetize it, but then like I don't formally like I'm very passionate about like the need to like end of life planning to like make things easier to
What
family
if
members
we
or whatever, but I
donate
still
the
like haven't
money?
like made my own will.
Yeah.
But I think like most of the stuff will just like automatically go to Tim because we're married. So yeah, exactly. Like if you can give the money to him,
Well, and
Yeah.
Tim can make more
Or-
beautiful art.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Or
amazing.
in reality, he will adopt more cats. That's
Okay. Okay.
That's
That-
art.
To fulfill,
he'll
fulfill
make
his
more
marital
art, and
needs.
also just we have 3 cats and 1 dog. It's excessive.
All right.
That's
Well,
so many cats.
should we just plug Tim's art right now?
Yeah, my husband is an artist, Timothy Prettyman. That is a real name. And like I feel like when we met on Bumble, and I knew he was an artist, and like we just like hit it off like right away, just like even just like chatting on the app. And I was like, this seems like I read it as like Pretty Man, and I was like, this seems like a pretentious like artist pseudonym.
Mhm.
But I can overlook it.
Yeah.
I was
Wow.
relieved to find out that like, no, it's an actual, like it's his mom's like last name,
That's so
Freeman. But I was like, that speaks very highly of Tim, that I was
Yeah.
like, this is obnoxious, but he seems so great.
Yeah.
That you could overlook something
Yeah.
like that.
His
yeah.
middle name's Gorgeous.
Yeah.
Timothy Gorgeous Prettyman.
Timothy Handsy boy.
Yeah.
Boy.
Oh
But yes,
my God.
he's an artist. He's very supportive, very talented.
How long have you been married?
Some of his art. We have been married.
Don't ask her such a tough question.
This would be so hard. It was just 3 years, I guess.
That's
Wow,
amazing.
congrats.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
Your Prettyman thing made me think there's a bit of like someone's calling Spider-Man's like
Spider-Man. Yeah.
Spider-Man.
Yeah.
But
Spider-Man is like-
Spider-Man,
Yeah.
but like Spider-Man.
It's like his last name, yeah.
like Dr. Spider-Man. Okay, it's 3 years. So how long have you known Tim? Like how long were you dating before that?
I guess our wedding anniversary was in June, and that was 3 years, and then we just in February, and then we just hit 5 years together in June.
Cool.
So it's interesting. It's like he never met my dad,
Yeah.
and he never met my mom like as my mom.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just like so weird to think about that sometimes.
Yeah. And he might have
Yeah.
a really tricky time because I did want to ask you about like obviously you're running this hour and able to make so much humor out of what some people would call very horrible situations. But as we are calling them, just life and things
Yeah.
that happen. And what's horrible is mostly our healthcare system and not people get sick. Like that happens.
Mhm.
Were you turning to humor? Like, were you able to joke about things with Tim pretty early on? Because you were really in it when you met him.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like I've always had like a darker sense of humor, and then I was only like maybe like 2.5 years into stand-up when my dad died, and just like immediately, like again, like so many absurd things happen that you can't help but laugh at. Like I had just like really dark, like that like reflex to just like make the joke. And I started running this show. I was living in New York at this point, and I started running a show with another comedian I met that like I'd seen him on stage like talking about his dad's death, and that was like made me think like, oh, okay, like you can do this, and you can like still make people laugh at it. And you can even like just drop it in the middle of like a regular set. So we used to run this show called Dark Spots, and it was like monthly showcase at Union Hall in Brooklyn. It was like the idea was like comics do all like their darkest, saddest, most traumatic material. Like sometimes we do like a theme, but like then we
bring
just
it back.
It open.
Yeah, let's go. That's just any show we're on.
Because like, especially it's like after I moved to LA, like I would be back sometimes and do it. But the comics I ran it with Nate Fridson and Shane Torres, and then just like the more that Shane was on the road, it just like kind of became. And like he gave us like his permission to like, oh, if you want to like find another co-host or whatever. But yeah, like I mean, it was really special, and it was like just seeing the way that audience members like come up to you or like me or like other comics on the show and like want to talk to you. It's like comedy like broke the ice sort of for people to like want to talk about this stuff, especially if they could relate somehow. It's just like, oh, nobody like knows how to talk about it. So like I felt seen or whatever. And for comics too, it was like, you don't want people to be doing that instead of going to therapy, but like in terms of like there were some things that
what's
like
cheaper, that's what everyone always says.
We'd encourage people to be like, hey, if you want to like try something new that you've never talked about, like if you're comfortable with that, like feel free. And like we had a couple times that were like, wow, I was like, I don't know, I guess like even early on when I did comedy, I've had mental health issues and like eating disorder in my past, and I was so ashamed I didn't really talk about it with anyone. And then I started talking about it on stage. And all of a sudden it was like, oh, if I can like talk about this to a room full of strangers and like have a sense of humor about it, like I can be more open about this like in my life in general. And I feel the same way about death. Like I think it's kind of important to be more open so that other people can be more open.
I think you also recognize how many people it relates to. Like as soon as you say something out loud, like four people will like be like, oh, this happened to me, this happened to me, this happened to me. For a while when I started comedy, I didn't do any dead dad material because also weirdly enough, it's like people say daddy issues or like hacky things about women in comedy.
I had someone fucking follow me on stage once and make a crack about like, oh, like good thing I'm married because like in the past, like my type was like girls with daddy issues, and I was like, my issue is that he's fucking dead. Like what the hell, man?
I say to people, I was like,
how embarrassing for you. Daddy issues because your dad's dead. Like what?
Yeah it's like that's the issue we're talking about. Like me just like talking about my dad's death on stage isn't that like fucking morons.
Like the like mental gymnastics to be misogynistic is crazy. Also, like like to go be like, oh, she must be a slut because her dad had cancer for 15 years. You're like, what the fuck, man?
Also, like, the concept of daddy issues in general is so funny. Regardless, like even if it is like, oh, you had a bad absent dad, how is that the daughter's fault?
Also, it's always the man's fault. Literally everything you're saying is the man's fault, and no one has more daddy issues than every man I've ever met.
Amen.
No one wants to be their dad. No one is chasing an absent father or chasing a smothering mother more than men. I'm saying, like, when the joke I was doing was like daddy issues. I was like, I don't have the issues because I didn't have the daddy part. I was like, it's crazy to like look at me and say, oh, daddy issues, like as if I didn't have a much more fulfilling life than most people with their fucking dumbass 90s dads. Who had a good dad? Find me a good dad. I'm looking. Everyone like will say, oh my god, blah blah. I can't believe you didn't have a dad. And I'm like, can't believe the shit your dad did. Like I'm like I'll never like obviously I wish I got to meet my dad. That would have been pretty cool content, but I don't think
you didn't give him the option.
Everybody's got their own, like, everybody.
The more I hear about dads, I'm like, fuck, man, Jesus. But I didn't want to do jokes about it on stage for a while. I was like, I need to be in a place where I'm good enough at comedy and confident enough for myself to make this funny. I always was like, I need this to be funny. Because I would get angry if I got an awe or looking horrified, and like you've mastered it with your disease, like being able to like talk about being ill and getting people on board right away, like. And I got really great advice from Betty Smithsonian. She told me this was like a key I was missing. It's so simple once someone says it to you, but she was like, this is information you've been able to sit with for 30 years. You're saying it to people, expecting them to hear you, understand it, be on board, and laugh in one sentence. You can't do that. You have to have a bridge even if it's a sentence or two, like you're doing a short set, 10 minutes,
Yeah.
like I'm not going to throw out dead dad material unless I have like a smooth, like way to connect it to something, because people are hearing it and immediately stop listening to me because like, oh, what if my dad died? I can't believe her dad died. Imagine that. Imagine like, oh, I want to be pregnant with my husband.
Is this
like,
true or is it part of a joke? That's the one that,
yeah, like is she gonna
Is it
like
a setup?
is it gonna be a joke and her dad actually just left her family? Like blah blah, blah. Is that gonna be this whole? And I'm like, oh, true. Everyone is just thinking about themselves. So like, I was losing people, and that was like such a helpful tip because now I'm like, oh, because people get weird and all. So I'm able to even just do a filler like. Pretty sure it was my dad. Don't know why you guys are being weird about it. Like,
I will do so. Like that's how, because I with this show, like a lot of it is like making jokes about like how like I'm gonna like ease you into this. Like, so sorry if you didn't know the show, like that kind of stuff. Yeah. But when I was performing stand-up more regularly, and like I just like get right in, like I'm just like I don't know, this is my life. Like I don't know what else to talk about.
Right.
Nothing like I don't feel like talking about how like dating is hard or whatever.
Amen.
Dating's because of all the daddy issues.
That's exactly it. Yeah. I'm just like I'm gonna cover this just in like a different way.
It all comes down to it.
But yeah, like kind of like having that thing of like, oh, is it too soon? Like that's fair. You guys just found out about it.
Right.
Like, kind of just like, and I think that like giving people like it's just like an extra layer of like letting people know that like you're here doing this, and like it's like I wouldn't be saying this if it weren't okay for you to laugh. And I acknowledge that death and like this stuff is uncomfortable to hear, but like I can also make fun of you for being uncomfortable with it. It didn't happen to you.
Totally. I feel that way so hard when I'm on stage and people give me the awe, or I've had people come up to me and be like, I was totally with you on the dead dad stuff. And I'm like, okay, what?
Yeah.
It did take me a bit to feel comfortable enough to do it, but then I also wasn't prepared for people coming up to me and like telling me their stories.
Yeah.
I wasn't prepared for that.
That can be a lot.
Yeah. And I was wondering, like, I do jokes about the worst things people have said to me. Like, I do a joke about I had an elementary school teacher, like, I didn't want to make the Father's Day gift for the year. Like at the end of the year, we made Father's Day gifts. I was like, I don't want to do this. She was like, make it anyway. Like just things people said to me my whole life that I didn't recognize are objectively funny now. Cause I can like look back and be like, of course they were looking at a 5-year-old and being like, no, I don't know what to do with this. What would you say if you remember whether it was your dad or your mom's situation, the worst maybe phrase or like mindset people had or like told you to have? Like, if you have anything that comes to mind, like Kirsten and I always joke that people always say to her, I can't imagine.
Yeah.
And she has to be like, no, you literally can, because I'm telling you what's happening.
Yeah, I can describe it if you want, but you probably don't want to hear it.
After my dad died and like he'd been sick for so long, the like last year of his life was like particularly difficult, and I'm sure physically and emotionally painful for him. And people would say, and maybe I'd feel differently about this if I did have like religious beliefs, but people would say like, well, he's in a better place, or like, at least he's not in pain anymore. And I'm like, yeah, I think he'd still rather be alive.
Yeah.
Like he's not in pain. Like he's not in a better place. He's dead.
The toxic like positivity twist on it.
Yeah. And it's also like for someone like I again, like if I were religious and believed in like heaven and afterlife, like maybe I'd feel differently about that. But for me, I'm just kind of like, I find it comforting to think that there is nothing and you feel nothing. And then it's just sort of like, we're all, here for a short time. And then like we go back into the earth, like that becoming like part of, I don't know, the universe again, like it is really comforting to me. So that one. And then with my mom's situation, if people will be like, oh yeah, my grandpa had Alzheimer's.
You're like, oh, your 90-year-old grandpa?
Yeah. And they'd also try to like be like, oh, and I saw how hard that was like for my mom being the caregiver or whatever. It's just like, yeah, it's still not the same. And it's also like what you guys are saying, it's just like, I don't need you to understand. Like I don't expect you to understand.
Yeah.
It is worse when you try to equate it as if you could.
Right.
I think people try so hard to relate because they easily could have just been like what we were saying before, just like that sucks. Like that's so hard.
That. Yeah.
I really hope you have a good support system. Like how are you managing? Like, I don't know. There's nothing good because also for me, it could be the mood I'm in that day. Like, and I make a joke about my dad and then I do a lot of jokes about like not knowing that side of my family. So I'll say like I was named after my dad. So I basically have the girl version of my dad's name. And like how I don't speak Greek and people will push it on me because they want to talk about Greece or like Greek. And they don't realize like I'm protecting them. Like I'll push them away. Like I don't speak Greek, like blah, blah, blah. And they will always double down and people will come up to me after shows and say something in Greek or say something else. And I'm like, I will snap some days. Some days I can just be like, okay. But like people will come up to me and I'm like, I'm not sure you heard the whole joke. Like the whole point is that I don't know that side of the family because my dad died. Like that part wasn't a joke. Like the part where I say, you want to talk to me about Greece, the thing that's happening right now, that was actually the joke.
Yeah.
So I'm like, sometimes I have to learn. I need a line for offstage when people don't.
Offstage. I mean, like just in general, like any time as a comedian and somebody's like, oh, like tell me a joke or whatever. Like that's hard. I went to Fountain Porter during like in the afternoon to like work on the show. I was just like, oh, I feel like I just want to like specifically focus on punch up and like I need to get out of the house. But I had like a printed out version of my script and I had my yellow legal pad as my preferred form of note taking, I guess. And it wasn't crowded at all when I got there.
Oh, Lord.
But then these guys came in and like it's not a huge it's not a huge bar, but it's like they didn't have to like they were like right next to me. And I'm like, I'm clearly working. And the guy was just like, he was like looking at me, he's just like, oh, I see DNR on there. Like, what's that about? And I was like, oh, like I'm a writer. And he was like, oh, okay. And then he's like, well, what? And this might also just be like, this was that he was just like, oh, okay. Like, I work in like medical sales or like something. He was just like, oh, what kind of writing do you do? Like, are you, or he first, I think his opener was like, oh, are you a doctor? And I was like, so confused. I was like, because like my handwriting's so bad. Like it is.
Because I'm drunk at this bar in the middle of the day with a legal pad.
I'm not drunk.
I'm just kidding.
But yeah, and and that's just like a lack of self-awareness and being a man probably of like, this person is clearly like working. But I was trying to be like, I don't want to get into like, I'm a comedian.
Amen.
I also don't want to be like, it says DNR because I'm doing a comedy show about death and dying and end of life planning. And like, I'm talking about like why I want a DNR. And like all that kind of stuff. But he like kept like asking us. I was like, look, like I feel like it's gonna be weird if I tell you, but I was like, I'm a comedian, I'm doing a comedy show about death. And then he got like all excited, and then like I feel like people want to tell you how they love Jim Norton or whatever, like whatever Sirius XM comedian they're listening to.
Name a Jim, they love him.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just kind of like, I don't feel like getting into it with you. It's also like, he actually like, I thought he was just going to be like immediately like weirded out and like make me feel weird. It was like, he was interested in like, because of, I guess, like what he does. He was like, oh yeah, I get how like that's so important, whatever. But it was just like, I'm not doing the show right now. Like, I'm not doing like
I'm not sitting here making you feel better or like giving you like I'm not working. I'm off the clock.
I think that is the tough thing about, especially when you're writing dark comedy, is like people think comedy is funny all the time and not that it's a performance. Like writing some of the stuff, like very cathartic for me. Like if I have something happen, like there are times I'm like, oh, this is a funny idea. I start writing it and then I'm like crying halfway through me writing. And I was like, oh, maybe I just needed to like write that out. Like something I was feeling about something and chipping away at that and finding the funny, like the process isn't what's funny. It's like once I get to it and like fully understand it myself or understand like, because there's so many things that I was not doing well on stage in talking about death because I have such what most people say, a crass view on it because it happened. And I'm so sick of people looking at me sad. Whole life, your whole life, most of your life, people oh my God, like giving you like a just really sad look. I finally did
sweet thing.
I referenced this video before I finally found it, so I can clip it in on this episode. But I was watching a home video my mom got a bunch digitized, and there's one where she waves, I'm blowing bubbles on the driveway, some 3 maybe, and our neighbor drives by. His name is Jim. She says, "Hey Jim, how you doing?" Jim was my biological father's name. So she just says, "Hey Jim, how you doing?" I blow bubbles and I lean to the camera. I say, "Is that my dad?" And like, that is so funny to me.
Crushed. I mean,
just 10 out of 10 joke. Like, just destroying. And my denim on denim.
But it's also like so heartbreaking.
Yeah. Devastating. When I think about, my mom had to tell a baby about death repeatedly while she was grieving her husband, had another little kid. And I was like, and this kid never met their dad. My dad never knew I was coming. Like, so layered. But the video itself, so funny. And that's like something I want to do on stage, but it's like, that's something I have to be so cautious about. So when people are like, "Oh, tell me a joke, what do you write about?" I'm like, this long-winded, well, listen to this. Like,
right. Yeah. When people are like, that's one of my biggest pet peeves is like, especially because I'm on the road a lot. And like, I was just in Vermont for like a week, and I'll sit at bar. Like, it's the only way to get food after shows. So it's the only place open and I'll try to like sit at the bar. Sometimes I'll try to sit at a high top, anything to like be left the fuck alone. Right. Yeah. And I'll, notepad, whatever.
Over the ear headphones, sunglasses.
Yeah. Right.
Men will still come up to you.
Find you. Yeah. Men will find you.
Actually, I've had people like come up to me after shows and be like, "Can I give you a suggestion?" And I'll be like, "No, thank you." No. And then they're like, "Oh, just real quick." And it's just like,
it wasn't about the time. Thank you. It was about, I don't want it. Yeah.
How long it took was not the problem.
Yeah. Right.
I was like, "Oh no."
Yeah.
No, I don't want this.
Closed.
Whatever this is going to be.
That thing you did
like,
on
even
stage.
Even if it's like a valid constructive criticism. Yeah. I don't want to hear it from like a stranger that just says.
So you just went on stage saying like such specific, unique stuff to yourself.
Yes. Right.
So you were hiding in Vermont.
Yeah. So I was hiding in Vermont. I was undercover. But
I consider the forest.
I picked the bar, and I had, I was there for a week, and like anytime I went to different places every time, somehow always just different men wanting to speak to you, and different ages too, which is always interesting.
Are you listening to this?
Yeah. Are you ready to fight these guys for us? Because we need a man now more than ever. Yeah. And it was like,
can I just say, I think it's about time that someone called out men. So I'm really glad that we're doing that.
Thank you. Yeah. Finally, really putting truth to power. But it was like just
men equal gross.
Gross. But it was a guy who, one of the nights was like a guy who came up to me and whatever, they always do the thing of like, "What do you do?" And I'm just like, "Oh, I'm here for work." Like, that's all I'll say. And people think it's something boring, whatever. If they keep pressing, I'm like, "Oh, I'm a performer," or whatever. Okay, I'm a comedian. But like, I started to realize like when people ask for stuff, like, "Oh," like even if they seem normal, even if they're like a woman or something, and they're like,
if they don't take like the hint of like, right. First of all, like not trying to clearly doing something else. If I just say like, where it's just like that, and that's what I experienced with this guy like recently, where it was just like, okay, but he kept pushing.
And then they go, "What kind of comedy do you do?" And like, or like, it'll be like, "Can I follow? Can I support and like follow your Instagram?" And it's like, of course, like you want to get followers, but like now I'll be like, I'll give it to you on my way out, because the thing that happens so often is people are like, "Oh my gosh, like I'm going to be sitting at this bar for another half an hour next to this person." They pull up my Instagram and now they can see, because immediately it says terminally ill, terminally chill, like as my bio. Yeah. You can look, they sit there as if it's not awful enough for them to watch your videos in front of you, no matter what they are. It's videos of me on oxygen talking about it. Yeah. Right.
No one will pull that up at a bar.
It's so brutal, like to sit through, because then they're like, "Are you actually terminally ill?"
Now you're like dealing with their emotions. Like you're like having to like do that like labor of like supporting them through finding out this news about your goddamn life.
Right. Let me make you feel better about this.
You say no one heckles you because of being terminally ill. Yeah. Like heckling doesn't happen as much, but you get heckled more off stage
in real life,
because people won't come up to me as much.
Yeah.
Due to my personality. But
producer and friend Neil Wood here. Brief commercial break.
Hey, hold right there. Don't dare skip this. This is an important message. Me and my boy Albert Davis, we want to tell you about our podcast, Seriously Dad. Albert, why should they listen?
Because it's the best podcast in the world. It's by two comedians who are dads, and you know what we're talking about? Being dads. It's called Seriously Dad. Check us out on social media at Seriously Dad Podcast, and
anywhere you get your podcast. That's where we're at. We're funny. We got some great guests coming our way. We cover the topics you want to hear. Check us out.
Because I'm generally like a distasteful person.
No one
I
wants
don't blame
to be
them.
bothered. But on stage, you won't get heckled because people are like, oh my God.
Well, it's going to look bad for them.
Right.
Yeah.
But they do come up to you off stage way more to ask or say something to you. Like, no one's coming up to me to be like, sorry about your dad.
Yeah.
Like, thank God.
No, they all have to
I
tell
mostly
me.
have people that like genuinely like have similar experiences.
Yeah.
Or sometimes like just like the way that they'll. So I wasn't doing the show, but I was doing a storytelling show at Case Comedy last week, and I told this story about my dad. So my dad was like keeping like a pretty big secret, like that we had found out about after he died. He had a secret boat. Not a secret family, so like not that bad really. But anyway, I kind of like set it up like that, and then I tell this whole story.
And big.
It was like a sailboat and was a piece of shit, and also like it's extra funny because
Did your mom hate boats? Like, why was it a secret?
I mean, she does hate boats. It wasn't a secret that like he loved sailing, always like wanted a boat towards the end of his life. Like he couldn't do that on his own anymore. So my brother, who also loved sailing, like offered to like rent a boat and like take him for like a Father's Day gift. And they went. It was just like a disastrous. Like the boat was a piece of shit. There was no wind. Like bugs were crawling everywhere. And my brother actually told this story like as his portion of like his eulogy, because it was just like he looked over and like our dad was just like happy to be there, and it just like really exemplified our dad. So then like cut back to like, okay, I told you guys that we found out about this boat. Like it was that boat. He like made my brother rent his boat.
My God.
But anyway, when I first said like in the setup of like, I'm, obviously people they're going to think I'm going to say like secret family or something else that's like horrible. When I said secret boat, this girl goes, me too. And I was like, did you just say me too? I was like, we have to talk afterwards.
So like, what are the odds, right?
Yeah. And I was like, I am so excited.
How was her boat discovered?
So I guess like it was also like very similar that like her dad like took her to like see this boat, and he's like telling her all about this boat, and I think she found out that it was his boat. It was before he died, but it was just like still like not at the time that they were actually like looking at the boat. And then after he died, it's like, what do I do with this boat now?
What the fuck?
Yeah. But anyway, like those kinds of things, like I appreciate when it feels like a connection when somebody is coming up to me. Like, I don't need you to come up to me and like, I'm so sorry that happened to you. But if you're like, hey, like, oh, I also lost my dad, and like you want to tell me a little bit about that, like I mean, like if they go on for hours, that would be awkward. But, like
I think the hard part for me is that it's never anyone. It can't be. So people with cystic fibrosis, we can't be within 6 feet of each other. Like we carry bacteria.
Okay,
like we aren't allowed to meet.
Wow.
And so it's always been the case. It's also there's very few people my age with cystic fibrosis. So very few people with it in general.
Yeah.
So it's not anyone coming up to me with it. It's always someone coming up to me telling me of someone they vaguely knew who, past tense, that person is always dead. So like they're always like, I knew someone who knew someone with cystic fibrosis. And I'm like happy to talk about it because it is like still a very rare disease and a specific experience. But I'm also like, feels like you're still working through this, and
or like you're trying to be like, I'm different from everyone else. I get it. Like it's not like you're like, I have also felt this kind of pain. Like if somebody else came up to you and was like, I also have a terminal illness, like that would probably be very different.
So powerful. I would love that conversation. Because when do I get that?
That's like, I'm like when that kind of stuff happens when like people like come to talk about their it's just like, okay, this is like why I do the show. Or boats or their parents' boats.
Also dyingofpurepod@gmail.com. If you have ever had a secret boat that you found out about, I'd love to hear it. Tell us where you're at. Tell us where the boat
We're going to put up a poll. Would you prefer your dad to have a secret boat or secret family? Both expensive. Both consume a lot of time.
Oh, boat. That's the thing I've heard about boat ownership is it is very time consuming.
That's what I'm...
Yeah, no, it was just like sitting... That was the other thing. That it was like all the way down in like Maryland or something. And like we were in... My parents were in South Jersey. So it was like there are plenty of places to like rent a boat that are closer than
Did you feel any type of way? Like if my stepdad passes and I find out he had a secret boat, I'll be livid.
I thought it was really funny. My mom was upset.
Yeah,
and I understand that.
Yeah.
Your husband, like the idea that like, they were married for almost 30 years. Like somebody was like keeping something from you. And it's just like, I think it's just like, I think it's like a thing he always wanted, and just like, didn't have that kind of money, or like maybe would have if it weren't for all the the hospital bills and everything. And I think it was just kind of like, I also remember it was like shortly after he'd been hospitalized. So like as part of like his vascular disease, he had this wound on his leg that was really tiny, but then it didn't heal. And it got like worse and worse. Like you could see down to the bone. And they were talking about like they would need to amputate because like the skin grafts weren't taking. And then like finally, like, and so many things like this would happen with my dad where it'd be like, oh, this like miraculous kind of recovery, like sort of at the last minute, which is I think also why like his actual death was so surprising because it was like we just gotten so used to like dad's in the hospital, it's scary, but then he'll be okay. So anyway, when they didn't have to amputate, I remember I was back home for some reason. I was driving him I remember being like driving across the Ben Franklin Bridge. I was like driving him back from like an appointment in the city and him saying like, yeah, I think I deserve a boat now. And like, I wish I could remember like he like had like an idea for like a name for it.
That's
what
I actually was going to ask now.
I wish I could remember exactly what it was because it was like really fucking funny. It was like very punny and like related to like losing a limb somehow.
Oh man, that's great.
Yeah. So
I don't know what it is.
Sea legs?
I wish I could.
Sea legs?
Maybe.
Sea leg.
Yeah, probably sea leg. Yeah. Maybe something along those lines. Yeah.
Great.
But it was just the kind of thing where it's just like, oh yeah, he'd always wanted to retire on a boat. Like my mom would never have like gone for that kind of thing.
Interesting.
And I guess, yeah, I don't know why he I don't know. Maybe it's just like nice to like have something for yourself.
Yeah. Do you have this?
It's pretty innocuous as far as secrets go.
Yeah. As long as she was good with money, like, because that's I think like renting out a boat slip and having a boat, from what I see, is a lot of money. Do you have this with your parents both passing? Like people only say nice things, like about the parents. Like I have that because I never got to meet my dad. No one wants to like sully his name towards me, and I would do this bit on stage where I would say like I just want one person to be like he was a real piece of shit. So like I could
your
feel
dad. He was a piece of shit.
There's no way. Like I want him to feel like connected some way because like when someone passes, no one says anything bad.
Yeah.
You've done this like either a bit or just in conversation on the pod or not, where you're like, I'm defying those odds of like being an asshole.
Yeah, I can. That's like the sell of the sitcom is like people can be terminally ill and not be a fucking martyr princess.
Yeah,
like in
and
every
that's
movie.
what always kills me with death. Like people like, oh, you like when people Instagram post like best mom ever. Like, oh, you all had the best. Like for Mother's Day and like Father's Day. I'm like,
what are the odds you all had the best mom ever?
All of you had a good granddad. Statistically wrong.
Also, there can only be one best mom ever.
Bad. So just curious, like if you've had
best mom ever in my experience.
Yeah,
the one mom.
Of the mom I had. Yeah.
Do you have people like come up to you telling you maybe not necessarily things you don't agree with, but just like
yeah, I guess like not so much. I definitely have had conversations with my siblings about like kind of things that it's just like okay, like I mean like every parent is gonna like fuck their kid up in some way, right? And probably in the way that like it wouldn't even occur to you that would be a thing that like stuck with them, or that was even like a thing that they would take that way. So like yeah, certainly I think like I can you know look at my parents like as people and objectively like that. I feel like there's more of an issue where people don't talk about him at all. My dad's side of the family, it's just like a little more
reserved. Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember being like very upset at like family gatherings or whatever, like especially like the first year after, where it'd be like, we're not like talking about it at all. It feels weird that we're not mentioning it. And you know, it's also like people grieve in different ways. So it's like maybe they couldn't handle it. Who knows? But that
they don't want to trigger other people.
Yeah, I'd find that really upsetting. Because it's also like because my dad was 55 when he died. My mom just passed earlier this year. She was 64. So like they were young. I was young. For most of my life, I was like a kid. Like I feel like I was like and my dad was always like very quiet growing up. I feel like
your dad was sick through his 40s. Like that's so young.
Yeah. I feel like I was like just becoming an adult and able to like have like learn more things about them as people and like to just have a better relationship. And then it was like that got cut off. So I am often like, oh, I want to hear stories about like what they were like growing up or whatever, especially if it's like, even if it's just like somebody that I've met for the first time that they're like, oh yeah, like I knew your dad back then, and like they know, you know, they passed or whatever. So I'm like, oh, well, like, would you tell me? Like, I would love to hear about it. And like, then I think they're kind of like, don't know what to do. But I'm like, yeah, I don't know. When I was 10, I didn't think to be like, tell me about your childhood. Like, you know, like, to be like, give me like your detailed family history.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's more what I run into, is like feeling like, I want to talk about him more, but I think like,
it's definitely delicate. Like my mom will sometimes say something about my dad, and I'll like maybe try to ask a question. She's like, well, you never ask questions. And I was like, how the fuck am I supposed to know what to say? And like,
I don't know what to ask.
Yeah, I don't know what to ask. Like I'm open to hearing stuff, because like sometimes I'll realize I know so little. And it's also then back to my other point. It's like, it's also like just stories. And like, she's not going to be like, oh, your dad fucking sucked at this. He was such an ass with it. Like, she, none of that's going to ever happen.
Maybe you guys didn't know about your dad's boat because you didn't outwardly be like, do you have a boat? And
true.
You should have called.
I mean, he was a lawyer. So like, unless we had him under oath, he may still have been like,
true.
No.
He knows his rights.
Fingers crossed behind his back.
Boat?
And you can't prove it.
It's so interesting, because like, was he going out sailing? Like, I have so many boat related questions.
I mean, I don't know if he ever was able to take it out by and
did you find like paperwork as to when he bought it?
There was that, and then I was talking to my older brother about it recently. Like, he's the one that like kind of like discovered it. Like I touched on the show is like, the importance of end of life planning was like that when my dad died, like we weren't even, he's a lawyer, and we weren't even sure if he had a will. And then like in the course of like digging through everything, like trying to find out like in the house and in his office, found I just described it as like the deed sale for the boat. Like, I'd have to like ask my brother like technically what happened. There was also, I think like the first clue for him was just like on like bills, seeing like these like regular payments to like a marina, and then like my dad's executive assistant, like she spilled the beans basically. But it's like, she could have just denied it, be like, yeah, I don't know what that's about, kind of thing. And I think there was also a deed to sale, but like technically like the title wasn't officially transferred, so she also could have been just like, yeah, no, it's not his, I don't know.
That's so
love that she was willing to narc. She was like, it's what, I don't know what to do here. It's over.
Maybe she didn't even realize it was
secret,
because it's like, why would you keep that? Whatever.
I'm trying to think of what you could say could be another reason that not owning a boat that you spend that much monthly at a marina.
I'm supporting.
You like really like the hot dogs?
Really?
For $3 a day.
Yeah.
I'm supporting a kid that lives there.
They have like those machines for like feeding ducks and stuff, and you spend that much a month on
the vending machines have the best Cokes in Maryland, so he has to go to that one specifically every year.
Yeah, and it's that marina, and I stock up.
Yeah, I spend monthly.
A vending machine at that marina.
It's an investment, but it's worth it.
Hey, then I'm good. I'm good on Diet Coke for like 6 months.
Yeah, right.
And no one needs to know about it, okay? That's so interesting. I mean, to be fair, when I turned 18, I got a letter in the mail about a building I owned in Brigantine, New Jersey.
Oh.
So my dad had like put, or I guess my mom then had put things in kids' names, like, so it came to me. But I just thought
like
the mail
Dodge
was
taxes
wrong
and
because
stuff.
my dad's literally, it has to be, because what the fuck? Because I got it and like his name is James. So I've often gotten mail addressed to, we're in a patriarchal society. I've often gotten like James mail. But I still get that dad mail. My dad has not been alive since 1991.
Wow.
And the mailing system still get James Pappas mail.
Another like in
another boat,
the messiness. Another marina. Just like the messiness of like all the bullshit dealing with like towards what ultimately like ended up being the last 4 months of my mom's life. When my mom was at the behavioral facility for that like theoretically like temporary stay, versus it was kind of like unclear of like who should we be paying the assisted living or that. And my sister-in-law, she's amazing. Like she like took the lead on like a lot of this stuff, because then when we started getting like I started getting like letters in the mail and calls being like, you owe us like tens of thousands of dollars for like your mom's stay there. And like I got one in the mail today where it's like they've lowered the amount for some reason. But yeah, and that's like just still like something that's like being resolved. And it's like, yes, like with her like Medicaid and everything, it's like when we know who to pay, like we will pay.
Yeah.
But just like they kind of like immediately sent it to collections. So yeah.
Sorry for your loss. Here's a bill for like all this fucking money.
Yeah.
That's so fucked up. I mean, unsurprising, but you'd feel like they would have some sort of system that like,
well, they started before he started harassing me with bills like before she died. So maybe they figured like, well, we're already doing it. It's fine. Like there's precedent for this. We've established that we're assholes.
People have some really brutal jobs. Like I know people hate the PPA, but can you imagine having to be the person that's like typing up the wording for this?
No.
Well, they're probably using ChatGPT.
Well, I think there was like the person that we were dealing with also was just like, they were very good at that job. Because they probably don't have any morals or conscience about what they're doing.
You probably have to lose it too a little bit. Like you just become so desensitized.
You've got to have a certain level of
my parents are both like very straightforward about death. Like my stepdad is a doctor of internal medicine and my mom is a mental health therapist and had what she had happen to her, and both her parents like health declined and passed away that way. But what was my point? We were saying sociopaths. Oh, my parents.
How do you spell it?
XQ.
Great.
Something about my parents being blasé about death, blah, blah, blah. I don't remember what I was going to say, but it was something about that. If it comes to me, it comes to me. I do want to ask you, you were saying a lot of stuff you mentioned is covered in your hour, some of these topics with a lot more jokes and things, and fun stage performance. It's so interesting, all the topics, and I know you mentioned one being just have a ton of money, but is there something like earnestly like you wish you knew ahead of time or like everyone should know about end of life planning?
I think one like very simple thing that like everyone can do, I do it on stage, a living will, like get a living will. You know, it's ideally something you do with a lawyer, but you can also like use like sort of like a fill in the blank sort of template or like a legal Zoom, like that kind of thing. They're not sponsoring me yet, but we'll see.
Do you want to simply bleep it out?
No, I want to invite them formally. But yeah, I just used one as that I have had like the template for years. My brother also, he's not a lawyer anymore, but he used to be. And like when we were doing everything for my mom, he like made one for her himself. And it was like, he showed it. It was just like, oh, this is just like, if anyone needs help filling this out, like let me know. But like really, it's truly just like you fill in your own shit. It's like a very broad one. And then I put off doing it for like 6 years because I don't like printing things out. It's just like
that was my next question. Where do you have to store it? Where do you keep yours?
Well, here's the thing. As preachy and passionate as I am about these things, like also a lot of doing the show is that I'm like, well, then I will have to get my shit together and like finally do it for myself. So I do in Pennsylvania, you don't need to have your living will notarized. So I just have 2 people sign it in the audience. So every time I do the show, it's updated, I guess.
That's amazing.
And then like, I need to figure out, I would say like probably like, I don't know, ideally like a fireproof safe to put like that. And then like your last will and testament, like the stuff will and any other important things. But yeah, just the living will is like, is for people that like don't know, it's, a legal document that specifies like what kind of procedures you would and would not want done if you become, incapacitated and can't speak for yourself. And there's like no reasonable expectation that you would go on to have any meaningful quality of life. And then you also designate like your healthcare proxy or medical power of attorney, which is like, if there's anything that comes up that you don't need to be like exhaustive about what goes into the living will, but if there's anything that comes up that's like maybe not life or death, but you can't speak for yourself, it's somebody that like you're authorizing to make decisions on your behalf, this is the person like that has like the power to like pull the plug, so to speak.
It feels like you could do it like a living will, like as a game of MASH, where like name 4 people, like how you want to go out, where you want to go out.
Yeah.
Because in my head, while you were saying that, I was thinking, I was like, okay, like obviously, like we've discussed, shoot us out back.
Yeah,
like if there's any reason that we're a vegetable situation.
Yeah.
Then I was like thinking of people in my life and who I would want to make that decision right now. All right, so that
Wait, can you guys just be like, that was hilarious?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
We were
Oh my god, you should totally see her show. That was
absolutely. Do you want to plug some dates as we're like wrapping up? I am sorry that I haven't been able to see it yet.
Oh, that's okay.
Where are the next couple of days?
Yeah, you're just a bad person. I don't like you, but that's fine.
I mean, shoot me out back.
No, it's okay. I've only done it twice up to this point. The next one will be Friday, August 9th with Crossroads Comedy in Philadelphia. And then after that, I'm doing it August 29th in New York at Caveat Comedy Theater.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited.
August 9th and August 29th. I know I have a show.
Putting it literally.
I know I have a show.
That's so exciting. How are you feeling that hour's going? Has it like changed your thoughts about anything death related?
I mean, it my thoughts about death changed a lot when so like this kind of like concept I originated during the writer's strike as a book proposal. Like somebody that I met through strike stuff like was like, oh, my book agent represents like a lot of like comedy people that have done like comedy memoir type whatever. He's like, you know, happy to help like any writers that like are in need during the strike. So I pitched them like basically like this concept of sort of like instructional manual / like memoiristic sort of like my experiences, like funny, and also like kind of documenting like me like finally actually like doing all this shit for myself and like trying to like other like aspects of like confronting death kind of thing. But I was also like, I feel like this guy's he was like very enthusiastic like anytime we talked about it, but there'd be long gaps. And it's like some of that is just like, that's like, you guys know, like that's the way the business works. Sure. But I was like, I feel like he might like ghost me. So I was like, I feel like I will be able to like repurpose a lot of this book proposal as a stage show. And there were some things that like over the years, like I've had jokes about stuff with my dad. I've had jokes about stuff with my mom. So it's like, there were things that I was like, well, I already know that like these jokes can work. And I was working on the book proposal, like while the most chaotic shit was happening with my mom. And then in December, I was like, all right, yeah, I'm gonna do the show. I'm gonna like kind of like, or maybe it was November, but I was like, I'm gonna reach out to like people around Philly and just like give myself like a month to write it and just be like, I'm just doing it. And that is what I ultimately ended up doing in the spring, but in between my mom died. And part of it was like, you know, I wasn't ready to like dive back into like any creative work, let alone that. But it was also like, in a way, I knew where to take the show. And part of that was like, I had an ending now. But less glibly, it was also Mom. Like, I kind of realized that it's like, I had been, you know, sort of like obsessed with all this stuff and like passionate about, you know, talking about death, being more open about it since my dad had died, and just like fascinated, like learning all these things. And I think like in the back of my mind, it was like, I was trying to wrap my head around, well, try to like prepare myself like emotionally for like when my mom would die. And also maybe like there's like something called like the death positivity movement, and it's all about like accepting death acceptance and just kind of like accepting the fact of it, basically. And I guess like I thought like maybe I can get to a point of acceptance where it's like I will be truly like just like fine with like the idea of dying. I won't find it scary at all, any of that. And then when I saw my mom die, and again, like I was at the deathbed for my dad too. So like I saw that then too, but it was just like this like wake up call reminder of like, oh, of course I'm never going to know what it's like. Like none of us are going to know what it's like. So then like kind of what am I doing? And like sort of exploring that and sort of like, what is the point of what what I'm doing. And, not that I thought it wasn't gonna be like sad at all or whatever, but just like the same kind of like, gut punch. Like I always describe it as like when you lose someone very close to you, that it's like, it almost like breaks your brain a little bit, where it's like, intellectually that like this has happened, that death happens, but it's also like, how is this possible?
Yeah,
like how is it possible this person just gone? And like, because I'd been through that before with my dad, because I lost like the version of my mom that was like my mom so many years before, it was like, oh no, it's this every time, every single time. Yeah. And that, is now I'm like spoiling the end of the show, but
no, it's so interesting.
It's a good teaser.
I'm like, oh my God, I want to see how you put it all together. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing everything you shared.
Seriously, this was awesome.
Yeah. Thanks
What a
for
great
having
first
me.
guest.
Thanks for dying up here with us.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Follow Alison on Instagram and come see her shows. Follow us on Instagram and please
do. Yep.
Venmo Kirsten. She's still dying.
Yeah,
you guys haven't Venmo'd enough.
Chill.
Your donations would have gone to what this week? Look, her brain doesn't even work anymore.
Yeah, they would have gone to my Adderall prescription.
All right,
I have that insurance. All right, well, that's Alison. I'm Kirsten.
I'm Jamie,
and we're dying up here.
Hey, producer Neil Wood, subscribe now to the Dying Up Here podcast at Dying Up Here Pod on YouTube. And make sure to follow Kirsten and Jamie on all the stuff. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time. Hey, how you doing? This is Neil Wood, one of the co-owners of Drop 10 Media Network and who helps run Biggest Little Comedy. You can check out all the other stuff we do at drop10.com. We've got podcasts, live comedy shows, and so much more. Go over there, support your favorite podcasts, follow them, subscribe. We appreciate it, and we're 100% DIY. Just a bunch of creatives trying to make it in this, and give us some feedback. We always enjoy a little feedback. Thanks.
This has been a Drop Tent Media production.